5D Mystery School.
Welcome back to 5D Mystery School. Let's get into it. So, remember John Clave Symes from my last lecture? Well, there was a center in the Mammoth Cave named after him, but it was later changed, but it was credited to his passion for his journey into the inner earth, in Gaia. But what do we know about inner earth? Well, I can tell you that some of the deepest caves are actually protected by the National Park System, and some of the most sacred trees and mountains, but we'll table that for another lecture. But before we get to inner earth, what do we know about the ground beneath us? What have we been taught? Well, how about we start at the surface? Some people barely scratch the surface, but we're going to start there. So, we know that soil is majorly composed of oxygen, a negatively charged ion, or an ion. It's in crystal structures and is the most prevalent in regards to weight and volume. The other positively charged ions, or cations, are silicon, aluminum, magnesium, iron, calcium, sodium, and potassium. Soil also has a pH scale consisting of alkaline and acidic. Okay, so let's rethink this, right? As above, so below. You see, human hair is quite similar. It's the antenna, and soil acts as antenna for this flat plane. You know, we get those spikes of energy from the electromagnetic spectrum. Hair is composed of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur. But that's just the overall chemical composition. Hair also contains about 12 to 15% of water and trace mineral elements of calcium, cadmium, chromium, copper, zinc, iron, and silicone. So essentially, soil acts as hair of the earth. Just another way to connect us to the electromagnetic field. So then, essentially, the longer your hair, the better your connection to the field, the collective consciousness, the ether. There are many ancient and modern civilizations that adopted this belief that the longer your hair, the better your connection. It was a way of them maintaining and collecting power. Now remember this point because we're going to come back to it later in this lecture. Well, what else do we know about Earth's surface? We have trees. That's me and my sister in front of the largest tree on Earth, the General Sherman. Now remember, the most abundant element in soil is oxygen. And this explains why trees provide us with oxygen. Trees are deeply rooted into the earth. The soil feeds the tree feeds us. Without the trees, we wouldn't really have an oxygen supply. Trees. So research has shown that trees actually give off their own electromagnetic field. Like and follow for part 2. Alright, part 2, let's go. Alright, so trees give off their own electromagnetic field, right? So this means if you were to ground power lines next to those trees in turn will start to give off weird electromagnetic fields. And if you lived in a house by that activity, then you would start to have weird dreams. It would start to affect your field, your Merkaba. Let's take a look at a video clip from UNSW Sydney to better grasp this idea. Roll the footage.
So it's a bit of a geological and archaeological whodunit. Before this work, we knew there was a lot of things happening around the world at 42,000 years ago, but we didn't know precisely how. And so this work has been coming together, bringing these ancient kauri trees from New Zealand, which have been buried in wetlands, digging them out of the ground and analysing for the radiocarbon content in the rings. So for the first time, we've been able to actually precisely date what happened when the Earth's magnetic fields last flipped.
While people knew that the magnetic fields occasionally reversed, everyone had kind of concluded that it didn't have much impact biologically or climatically. And we've found the complete opposite.
In that process of flipping from north to south and south to north, effectively the Earth's magnetic field almost disappeared, and it opened the planet up to all these high energy particles from outer space. It would have been an incredibly scary time, almost like the end of days.
What we've found is that the reversals have caused pronounced climate change, which was a huge surprise, but also impacts on human populations that have previously been unexplained or mysterious.
We're seeing things like a huge expansion in the ice sheets over North America. We're seeing wind belts around the tropics and in the Southern Ocean shifting. We're seeing this explosion of art preserved in caves around the world, the extinction of the Neanderthals. All these things seem to be happening around the same time.
But it was only when you started talking between different areas of science you could see the connections. And before that, none of the different fields had worked out 42 was the key event across multiple different areas.
So being in nature really connects you to that field. So hugging a tree is literal therapy. Try it. So it's safe to say that this EMF has many purposes. It locks in with our hair, the trees, the soil. Homing pigeons, honeybirds, dolphins all use it for navigation. And we covered that it can also be manipulated for weather modification. It can also be used for power. Ancient civilizations like the Atlantean, the Egyptians, the Lemurians, they all knew this. Some might say this is even how the pyramids were built. Side note, you can use sound as a power as well, but we'll table that. Speaking of EMF power, there's another group of people that tapped into this. And specifically for this lecture, Speaking of EMF power, there's another group of people that tapped into this. And specifically for this lecture, this is who we're going to focus on. And I'm referring to the Vril Society and the channeler Maria Orsic. You see, this group also used the power of hair and said that it connected them to the other worlds. Okay, so the Vril Society, they associated with this group, the Black Sun. Now remember, we discussed the Black Sun in the last lecture. I don't want this video banned, so I won't really go over who else they were in association with. Now, when discussing the EMF field, one might ask, how do they utilize this power? Well, here's the Hanabu 2, here's the Vril 1. Well, they use propulsion systems and magnetic impulses, but they did have an EMF flying vehicle on the drawing board. Alright, so they were formed in 1921, and in 1942, they developed the Vril 1. And it is believed that this model is the reason for a lot of the sightings in the late 40s and 50s. And the Vril and Thule Society eventually linked up with the Batsis, and they developed a flying machine, of course under the command of Bittler. So how did they find out about this mysterious EMF power? What's the connection? Who was the connect? So in another lecture we spoke of the Aurora Borealis and how this possibly happens. But would you suppose this black sun has anything to do with that black sun that we referenced before? Hold that thought. So the Batsis went to Queen Ma Land in Antarctica before, during, and after World War II. And it's known that they built a station down there. They transferred heavy artillery, a lot of the flying vehicles we referenced, things to set up a proper camp. So who or what did they find there? How did the name Black Sun come about?
He points both sides and writes, same. Below he writes Summerland. He draws rays coming out of the black sun and writes, Northern Lights. The center of the drawing is equal to the Mason symbol, which is a square and a compass.
Part 3, let's do it. Alright, so this is Dr. Hermann Oberth. He designed rockets for the German Reich. Now he was getting interviewed and he said, we can take all the credit for our advancement in technology. And when asked who by the reporter, he said, people from other worlds. I don't think that's sugar-coated. Okay, so the Batsi successfully built a base in Antarctica and they were helped by people from other worlds, as mentioned by this doctor. So it's believed that they lost World War II. And as far as majority of society knows, that's the way the story goes. But you see, Bittler had many body doubles. So it was believed that he didn't actually unalive himself. It is believed that he was actually flued out to Argentina. Now, do we have any clues that he has major involvement in Antarctica and that he went to Argentina? What's the missing link? Well, this is the Antarctic Treaty System. And as you can see, the headquarters is in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Anywho, so World War II ended in 1945. Now, after the conclusion of World War II in 1945, in 1946, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, along with Australia and France, led an invasion to Antarctica. Now, who or what were they looking for? Many believe that it was just a scientific expedition. However, they had between 4,500 and 5,000 soldiers, helicopters, multiple submarines, heavy artillery, planes. Now, does that sound like science or war? Buddha or Biden? Now, Admiral Byrd was given an unlimited salary and 8 months to complete this expedition to conduct science experiments with these guys. However, they didn't last 8 weeks. They were defeated by these guys. And Admiral Byrd even admitted to seeing the Botsis down there. So how did these guys retaliate? That's right, you have the UFOs that flew by the White House in 1952, and those are allegedly connected. Now this is Karl Dunit, probably messed up that name, but he was the German Navy admiral. And he said the submarine fleet was proud for having built a Shangri-La on land. So who did they connect with in Antarctica? Well, we know the North Pole is sacred, the magnetic north. And the map that we have today is not accurate. Who do they find in the center? You see, we're taught to believe that it's just a large ice cap, because there are no mistakes in the design. I mean, the signs have been there for a while. So, there's so many layers, all happening under a dome. Or you believe the earth is round, you can imagine it like this. But like other ancient civilizations, these guys could have found inner earth, or Gartha. Now one must wonder, if our everyday reality is powered by EMF fields, can the same be said for inner earth? Because we've seen what happens when you tap into the power, civilizations that have it. Okay, like for the last part. Whoa now, buddy. So I got a lot of comments like this, pause to read. And some of y'all had to be expelled because you were just rude. Anywho, if you've been in 5D Mystery School for a while, you know I always bring the receipts. Got you, playboy. So, without further ado, roll the footage.
It was these pioneers, with their now outdated equipment, the obsolete planes, and old-fashioned whaling vessels, who blazed the way for Operation High Jump, the great expedition of 1946-47. Admiral Byrd was officer in charge of the project, while another polar veteran commanded Task Force 68, Rear Admiral Richard H. Cruzen. Under their command was an impressive armada of 13 ships, manned by 4,000 men, generously equipped with a variety of planes, ranging in size from great amphibian mariners to nimble bee-like helicopters, all specially prepared for cold weather flight.
Oh, bitch, be humble. Sit down. Be humble. Sit down.
5D Mystery School.